All right, I'm Matthew Zayas. I'm the second year of Master Public Administration student, and I studied in my project energy performance contracts. Specifically, I thought this was interesting because I've got a background in environmental science and obviously in political science, so it kind of encompassed the two things that I really enjoy studying. So, in 2000, legislative statute came out, and they wanted to implement energy efficiency program in the state of Kansas. This produced the Facility Conservation Improvement Program, and in this program, there are three major stakeholders involved. The first stakeholder, well, I mean, they're all equal stakeholders, but energy service companies, or ESCOs, sign master contracts with the Facility Conservation Improvement Program that allow them to work with interested public entities who want to improve their energy efficiency. Before energy performance contracts come into play between the energy service company and the public entity, the FCIP reviews them to make sure that actual energy conservation measures exist and that measurement and verification occurs to make sure that these conservation measures can fully recuperate the costs within 30 years, because that was in the legislative statute. In contracting, for the contracting between the energy service companies and the entities, there's four major steps involved. The first step is preliminary energy audit, and during this step, the interested public agency will talk to the FCIP, tell them that we are interested in improving our energy efficiency, and the FCIP says, okay, here are the 10 energy service companies we have contracted out with. Communicate with them and choose 2 or 3 to come out and study your facility and look for potential efficiency that can be improved. So in the preliminary energy audit, that happens. Like the agency will talk to 3 people, those 3 companies will come out and say, this is what we think we can do. In the investment grade audit, that's when the public agency says, okay, we'll choose this person who we're very interested in working with, and then that company will come back out and do a more thorough audit. They'll say, okay, do you want to focus on heating and air conditioning? Do you want to focus on water? Do you want to focus on general electricity? And that's what they'll do. And then when they decide what they want to work on, they sign an energy performance contract. And there's a lot of important things that happen here, but they talk about the baseline. They're like, okay, we'll need this information from your previous couple months to determine what your normal energy usage is now, what your normal bills are now. That way we can use this current stuff to reference what happens after we put the machinery in, so we can know your overall gain and the money you'll save and all that. So they use some baseline information to plan it out, and then they use measurement and verification, and that's the main part. After they install all their equipment, verification will occur that allows them to know if they are actually seeing the benefit or not. And given the fact that in Kansas, this is supposed to be a budget neutral project, this is the most important step because this is the only way we know if they are if the agency is fully getting their money back within 30 years. So in 2016, the Legislative Division of Post Audit reviewed this program to know whether or not these energy saving stipulations were actually being met. This is a limited scope audit, so they audited 3 programs, 3 participants, which were Wichita State University, the Plainville USD School District, and the Unified Government of Kansas City, Kansas, and Wyandotte County. They figured we'll do a good combination, really get a good mix. And although each agency was happy with the improvements, or we're saving a lot of money with these projects that happened, none of the agencies could verify whether or not the guaranteed savings had occurred. Like whether they would find all the savings guaranteed within the 30 years that they legally had to. So that's where my project kind of steps in. I wanted to get some better ideas on how we can better work with measurement verification and make sure that these guaranteed savings are occurring. So to do so, the first thing I did was identify best practices in measurement verification in contracts at both the state and federal levels. I studied Colorado, Virginia, Hawaii, a lot of different states' programs that were similar to Kansas's. And then I also studied the federal level. The U.S. Department of Energy has some really good information. Upon establishing these best practices, I evaluated 6 energy performance contracts from organizations who had participated in the program. I used the 3 that Pulse Audit looked at, and then I found 3 other ones. And then after reviewing these contracts, I explored the reasons behind the variance, and I kind of established some ideas of where Kansas can go to improve in the future. Make recommendations about that. So I needed to define measurement verification, obviously, before I could determine if it was happening in these contracts. And it's a formal process to determine that energy saving equipment installed by the energy service company produces the guaranteed savings. And looking at the literature, I established 7 different main best practices. The first one is length of the baseline period. That, of course, is important because you got to know what you're paying now in energy costs to know if you're improving upon that or not. The second is the performance period, and this is like the period directly after the new machinery is installed. And basically, during the performance period, this is the only time in which measurement verification actually occurs. So one would think that the longer the performance period is, the more accurate your savings numbers are going to be. Another best practice was the International Performance Measurement Verification Protocol. This is the government's way of judging energy methodology. Measurement verification plan, these are crucial to have in your performance contract. This plan of how to occur. Cost of M&B is also important. Commissioning of post-installation activities. And finally, whether or not the measurement verification report was required to be sent to the state energy office, the FCIP, at the same time that it occurred. So to conduct my research, again, I identified best practices, and after I identified those, I kind of had an evaluation instrument, and as I was reading each contract, I kind of looked at this, and it addresses each of the 8 things I just presented. And then after that, I had to get these energy performance contracts. The first thing I did was I reached out to the FCIP to see if I could get them from them. Basically, they wanted a lot of money for these contracts, and it was more than I had in my pocket. So I reached out to 5 public entities who had participated in these projects pretty recently, and 3 of them responded. So in all, I evaluated 6, which were the first 3 that legislative post audit provided to me. But I also evaluated the Parsons USD contract, Valnego, and City of Eudora. And the first best practice I evaluated was the baseline period, which according to the literature should last at least 12 months beforehand. So it needed to consist of at least 12 months of energy usage data. This stipulation was also required by the master contract that the energy service company has to sign with the FCIP. So 6 of 6 contracts not only included a 12-month period, but they required 3 years worth of baseline information, which is pretty good. The second one I looked at was performance period. It is not required by the ESCO FCIP master contract, and basically the literature said it needed to be 2 to 3 years. We only had one that was over a year and a half, which was the City of Eudora. So That was important to note. The International Performance Measurement Verification Protocol, this was established in 1995, partnered by the U.S. Department of Energy. And basically, they don't require the contractors to follow this, but it's the main guideline that a lot of them choose to follow. So it was not required by the master contract between the service company and the FCIP, but because it's the main guideline, all of the energy contracts included that. A complete M&V plan is also important. It should fully explain how and when measurement and verification will occur, like all sorts of stuff. Establish baseline information that's going to be, that it's going to have in it. When the company is going to come out to conduct these practices, like it should do a really good job of detailing and fully explaining all that information. And all 6 of the energy performance contracts included this. Annual costs associated with M&V processes were also important. According to the literature, the average annual cost should range from 2% to 5% of the annual savings that the public agency earns. And only one of the energy performance contracts I reviewed had this. Plain bills was 4.7%. So I mean, that's pretty good. And 5 of the 6, well, all the other ones didn't include this. Commissioning is also important. These next 2 I'm going to talk about, commissioning and then post-installation M&D activities, are kind of similar, but there's a very fine difference. So commissioning, it assures that the equipment will provide the desired results. And this includes multiple things. This includes, like after they install it, they'll come in and start it up, turn it on. They'll have a lot of checklists that they'll make sure that like this equipment is meeting the manufacturer's design and all that. But they'll also come in and provide training to the employees of how to work the equipment, because they want to make sure that it's going to work. So this was required by the ESCO FCIP contract. Therefore, all contracts included this stipulation. Post-installation M&D, it's a little different in commissioning because basically, while commissioning is just turning on the equipment and making sure that like it was installed properly, post-installation has more to do with like after we turn it on, do we still expect it to provide the same amount of efficiency as we estimated beforehand? And it was not required by the FCIP master contract. And 5 of the 6 contracts documented post-installation M&D anyway, so that was good. And then the last best practice I compared was the specification that the M&D report will be submitted to the FCIP. A lot of states I looked at, Colorado, I know, and a few other states, they said that yes, we require this M&D report to be submitted to our state energy office, just because like it's important for them to have this for the very reason that limited post audits struggle with. Like you got to have accountability for whether or not your program, your funding is actually bringing the correct results. With the FCIP, they do not require this. Therefore, 0 of 6 contracts require submission of the M&D report to the FCIP. So here I kind of have a summary of the information. These are all the public entities I've looked at, of course, and then going across on the top are each of the best practices noted. So baseline period, all of them had a baseline period longer than a year. Performance period, all of them had a performance period of less than 2 years. Application of the federal protocol, they all use that. They all had an M&D plan report. Only one of them paid between 2 and 5% of the annual savings for the cost of M&D. All of them had commissioning, nearly all of them had post-installation M&B, which I think for the one that didn't, it's a very fine line, you know, so technically they didn't state that this was happening, but commissioning and that, there's not that big a difference. But most shockingly per se, none of them required that their M&B report results be submitted to the State Energy Office on the Facility Conservation Improvement Program. So, recommendations that I came to, the first one was to extend that performance period to a minimum of 2 years. I would say, like, just based upon this, like, we need a longer performance period. It'll guarantee, well, nothing's a guarantee, but it'll likely bring stronger results down the road. We'll be more confident that we're meeting our efficiency numbers here. The second recommendation I made was to encourage the participating public entities to dedicate a minimum of 2% annual savings towards measurement verification. What I learned from talking with FCIP officials was that technically they are only advisors to these public agencies, so technically they cannot require them to do something like that, but they can encourage them, and I would say that's important to guarantee accurate results and accurate efficiency. And finally, I would require these energy service companies to submit M&B reports to the FCIP. To kind of follow up on these recommendations, I contacted some energy service companies, and it was very interesting to talk to them. They noted that they could tell that employment turnover and all that was happening with the FCIP because they said it was kind of disorganized, and they didn't mind working with the FCIP, or they didn't enjoy working with it, particularly just because it was very disorganized. I spoke to a manager with Schneider Electric, and they're an energy service company, and he even said that he enjoys working in, because they're a regional, and they work in Nebraska, Missouri, Kansas, and Colorado. He even pointed out the fact that because Colorado has a longer performance period, they appreciate that because they're held to a higher standard. You know, and he says that if Kansas had that, he feels like there'd be less competition and kind of weed out some of the service companies that are less serious, which would be better for his business. The second thing I'd like to discuss is the fact that technically the service companies and the FCIP cannot renew master contracts until 2018, which I learned this by speaking with FCIP officials. So not only, now is the time to identify these best practices. And speaking with Lynn Bretz of the FCIP, she even said, it's like anything you can contribute to this, we would greatly appreciate it. So, and we're excited, and that's pretty much all I got. I'd like to thank the City of Eudora, Kansas, Parsons, USD 503, Montego, USD 320, their sharing of these energy performance contracts, and then also the advice I got from Lynn Bretz, who's in charge of the FCIP, and also the information that Joseph Perla provided me, Mark Martinez, Peter Hinkle, and Stephen Spurgeon. They all work with energy service companies. A lot of their information really helped out. So, any questions? I can clear up. Yeah.
What's an energy service company?
They're private contractors, basically, that are in charge of installing these energy efficient products.
Okay. What sorts of things are they installing?
Air conditioning units, any sort of electricity stuff, water, you know.
So could it like be my electrician?
Maybe.
Okay. Like you'd be Standard Electric, for example?
Not in Kansas. I mean, it was mainly Train Incorporated, Schneider.
All right, that's fine. Baseline information?
Basically, like that's That's the information they collect before they start the construction, kind of get an idea of where the, like what the bills currently are, how much energy this commercial establishment, or in this case, this public agency is currently using. That way they can judge the efficiency after they make the change.
So are we basically talking electricity bills?
Yeah, electricity bills, water bills.
How can they not keep track of this stuff?
They might keep track of it, but they don't write it into the contract necessarily that it.
No, but Matt began by saying that's I was confused by that there was a problem in terms of developing the baseline because they didn't have this information.
Oh,
In the actual contract, it doesn't specify how long the baseline period needs to be. And best practices say the baseline period needs to be over a year in order for you to really tell if you've done energy savings over the different seasons. But the contracts that they enter into don't specify these longer baseline periods. So then essentially what he's looking at was shoddy contracts.
Okay.
I mean, again, it's really important to have that because if you're a service company who's getting ready to perform all these changes, and if you're getting ready to, like make this guarantee that we're going to save you all this money, you really want to be sure of how much money you're going to promise, because if not, you got to pay for the difference. But in Kansas, and that's where the performance period kicks in, because if your performance period is only 1 year, like after the end of 1 year, if you're the company and you're saying, okay, you're the agency, you've met the efficiency you promised, then after this, like these next 14 years of this contract, you're on your own. If it doesn't happen after that point, sorry.
I didn't understand best practice number 5. Annual savings. Yeah, that one.
Oh, well, this one and like the length of the performance period kind of go hand in hand, because this is the amount of money that the agency is investing to have the company come out there and make sure the equipment is still efficient.
So it's sort of a maintenance agreement?
Yeah, yeah.
And what's the issue here?
How much they actually spend on.
To make sure, yeah, yeah.
I didn't get that. I didn't understand what you guys said.
This is how much the agency is spending to make sure that measurement and verification is being conducted, which indirectly means this is how much they are spending to make sure that they are actually receiving the amount of money that they're due in savings.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
When you went back and spoke with the ESCOs, did you happen to ask them why they did not currently send M&V reports to the FCIP?
That's a really good question. I talked to one, and he was surprised at first that they didn't. Because I guess, like, he kind of just laughed. He's like, well, like, of course, like, why wouldn't the state not want to know about this, But he just said, basically, because they're not required to have that in the contract, and they didn't have it in the contract. But he said, if upon request, they would be happy to send this information to the state. But because they weren't required to do so in the contract, they didn't do anything about that in the contract.
So, generally, right, you know everything about these contracts. What do you think about the FCIP as a result of this research? Are they good? Are they useful? Should they have more authority? Should they have less authority? What's the deal with FCIP?
Honestly, it kind of just seems like the only real power they have right now is to advise these public agencies. Basically, the only thing they can do is make sure that these agencies are actually negotiating contracts that will improve their energy efficiency. A lot of the laws and all that a lot of the rules for this program are established in the legislature. So it seemed that if they really want to make a change, they got to do it through the legislature. And they also noted that on the master contract that was negotiated, because the FCIP only took over this energy efficiency program in state buildings in 2008. I believe before that, the Department of Administration was in charge of it. And their contract with all these loose rules are still what they're going with until 2018. So.
And you might not know this one, it's okay. In the other states where you look at best practices, are they just better organized and have better contracts, or did they have a stronger regulatory agency?
I am not sure, honestly. I know the state of Colorado, a lot more of this was decided in the legislature. So it's still run by their state Department of Energy, but they have a lot stricter rules that were created in their state legislature regarding the program.
Right, like their contracts are definitely much better, but I wonder if the actual agency creating the contracts, if they're just better public employees, or they just have a lot more authority to do something about it.
I am not
We should
sure.
go better. Big.
Man, what's the state legislature's interest here? Why do they care about energy uses in Wamego?
Honestly, that's a really good question. I don't know, I just think it saves, it saves buildings money, and it's supposed to be completely budget neutral. Because they're supposed to get the funding, they're supposed to recuperate all the money they spent within 30 years. So in the end, it saves these public facilities money if it's done right, so.
So it's about saving money and not saving energy.
Probably.
Is there any incentives from like state government or federal government if they do those sorts of?
Not through this. Not through this, which is like, it's kind of a funky little deal, right? The legislature is saying, we're gonna create this public program, FCIP. We are going to fund these public employees to review these private contractors and provide a little information to the local governments, but you guys then need to, on your own, decide that you wanna make these energy audit upgrades and pay for them. And it's supposed to be budget neutral, pay for itself. So they're not incentivizing it, they're kind of regulating local governments or other smaller governments through the use of FCIP. We imagine this program boggles the mind most days.
Yeah, I mean, like,
We're not quite sure. We think it is an example of waste fraud abuse.
for the small amount of oversight that FCIP actually does, they collect a large service fee from the agencies to provide this very small amount of oversight, Yeah.
So in the 30 years you're supposed to recoup your money, is the technology gonna be good in 30 years?
That's
In
the,
terms of energy efficiency, and see 30 years could probably advance technology and make it better.
that's another one of the problems. I mean, it's kind of just like, that's the, coming back to the performance period, like the company who installed the equipment only comes out there once, and they're just like, if we're beating this, if after 1 year of these 15 years or 30 years, or however long the contract is, if our estimates are correct for 1 year, we're just gonna call the whole thing good and never come back again. And I mean, that's basically the problem with this, because in a lot of literature, they said that typically your efficiency is not going to drop very much, but still, And then as far as new innovation goes, I'm sure it's better in the future,
Is there some sort of penalty involved here? So if Standard Electric doesn't realize the savings, then does the city or does Wamego School District have some sort of recourse?
Only for that 1 year. They'll come out there and say, okay, we had a shortfall in this 1 year performance period. Well, we don't even check for that, but after that, we're just gonna call it good and,
Yeah, no big fallback clauses back anywhere.
Anything else?